Hi guys, welcome back to our 40-foot shipping container workshop build. The point of building this workshop is so that we'll have somewhere where I can build parts this winter for our 44-foot hurricane damaged catamaran named Spiffy when it gets too cold to work outdoors. This week's video is sponsored by Surfshark. More about them a little bit later. Over the last couple of weeks I've made good progress from framing out the interior, applying spray foam in the office area, to reinforcing certain parts of the workshop to be able to lift our 4x4 CNC. Since the end of last week's video I've also made a little bit of progress, so let's start there. Up under the ceiling we'll have some unistrut. One set is going to be for hoisting the CNC, and this will also help spread the load out across multiple joists. On the second set of unistruts, I'd like to be able to use some wheel trolleys to be able to move around fiberglass parts. That means the second set of unistrut needs to be suspended from hangers. We'll get back to that later. I chose to through-bolt the first set of unistruts straight through the joist and the blocking to get maximum stiffness. After the top of the shipping container has been spray foamed, I'll no longer be able to access the nuts, so I need to make sure everything is in place before I insulate. Every single nut got a dab of thread locker and got snugged up nice and tight. I then repeated that process for the second section of unistrut in the first set. And that pretty much brings you guys up to speed. Now, last night I went to through-bolt the last bit of angle to one of the joists, only to realize that my 1/2-inch drill bit is too long to fit with the drill attached in between the joists in that one area. And also the only short drill I have, the maximum size of short drill I had, was 3/8. So at some point today we're gonna have to do a hardware store run. It's a 45-minute drive to the hardware store, so in an attempt to be smart, which I'm sure will ultimately fail, I have chosen to just hold off on getting the drill bit a little bit, and then we'll get the last bit of framing out of the way, because I think we might also need more 2x4s, and we might as well combine those two trips into one. In this little unassuming area here, butting up right against my office, I want to have a little area where we can hide our lithium batteries and 2 inverter chargers and a little tool cart. So we'll need to build something here. To figure out the storage area, I need to frame the wall that separates the office from the workshop. That also means framing a rough opening for a door, yet another thing I've never done before. The big brain teaser of the day was figuring out the locker/storage area. After much back and forth, I had most of the 2x4s I'll need for the framing, but I decided to hold off on actually securing them so I'd have an easier time spray foaming. After the aforementioned run to the hardware store, I was able to also frame out the second wall separating the 2 areas in the office. I know you might not be able to see it back there because the lighting is a little bit horrible in here right now, but we have the frame walls in place. I've also gone ahead and put up the hangers for the unistrut. I had the unistrut mounted up there just briefly to make sure all the hangers were lined up correctly, and everything looks perfect. So that means we're ready for spray foam. I need to do a bit of cleaning up in here and put down some plastic before we can start spraying the foam. While I do that, let me have my identical brother tell you about the sponsor of this week's video. Surfshark, the sponsor of today's video, is a virtual private network. What is that? Well, it's a way for you to put your computer virtually in a different country, but it can also be a way for you to protect yourself when connecting to public Wi-Fi. There are several good reasons to use a VPN. Ava is back in London with her sister and our niece, and they use Surfshark every single day to watch the TV shows that are not available in the UK. It's super easy and it's set up right on her Apple TV. Depending on the country you travel to, certain shows might not be available, or perhaps the entire network isn't available. An example of that is Max in the UK, but thanks to Surfshark, Ava and our niece won't have to be without their favorite TV shows. Surfshark is also fantastic for more serious purposes, like for instance when we were cruising in Europe and we had to help Ava's parents with their health insurance. That website, like so many other government websites and healthcare websites, was only available within the US. So the only way we could help Ava's parents was to use Surfshark to virtually put our computer in the US. Go to surfshark.com/saillife or use the code SAILLIFE during checkout to get an extra 4 months of Surfshark VPN. Thank you so much to Surfshark for sponsoring this week's video. I've covered up the floor to not get drips of spray foam everywhere. I've also taped off the unistrut that's already bolted in place and the hangers to keep those looking nice. And most importantly, we are within the temperature range for application. I think last time I spent something like 45 minutes per kit applying this stuff. This time I might be a little bit faster, but no matter what, in a few hours we should be done applying spray foam, and I am very excited about that. It's not that applying the spray foam is that bad. Really, the most annoying thing related to the spray foam so far has been trimming it in the office to make room for the rock wool. But out here in the workshop, we're just gonna go for 2 inches of spray foam and no rock wool, meaning no trimming. The reason I'm so excited to be done with this spray foam adventure is because it's very temperature dependent, and very soon it's going to be too cold here for me to apply spray foam, and if I don't manage to finish this workshop before that happens, well then I'm going to be very limited in what I can do about the catamaran this winter, and I won't be able to make much progress on the refit, which would be horrible. So yeah, I've been a little bit stressed out. This time around, I want to test out the fan application doodad here. These tips, and this is different from kit to kit, but from this company they come default as the cone spray, but you can convert them into the fan spray thingy with one of these threaded doodad that goes on here. From what I read online, these fan things are not that great. That's why I stuck to the cone the last time around, but well, it is an adventure after all. Something I was a little hesitant to do during the first application of spray foam was to stop. I just kept going until the tanks were empty because I didn't want to risk anything curing inside of the tip, me not being able to get the tip off of the gun. But that's why you apply this petroleum stuff. I tried that on one of the subsequent applications, and as soon as you've got this stuff on the gun, the tip comes up super easy and it's super easy to swap them out. So if you need to take a break, you can definitely do that. And just because it seems to come up every time I mention spray foam, if you're doing a larger area like this, you might get a really good deal from a professional guy to do it. These kits are not cheap, and that seems to be the conventional wisdom, that it's cheaper to get it done by a professional if you're doing a larger area. I do not know if that is true because I was not able to get a quote to have anybody do the shipping container for me, hence why I'm sticking with the DIY. My excitement to try the fan tip versus the cone spray faded within, let's say, 10 seconds of trying it. There is way too much spatter, and you seem to lose all the accuracy you have with the cone. The first kit got me through the first wall. The foam is going on thicker than 2 inches, but I've already paid for it and I have no use for leftovers, so I might as well apply it. So far, so good. That is the first 2 kits applied, and we have the 2 sidewalls done, plus a little bit of the ceiling. So I think we're right on track. I figured now would be a good time to take a little break and get out of the Tyvek suit, but I seem to have adhered the Tyvek suit to my arm hair with some foam, so... The overhead stuff is definitely going to be the most annoying, just because it kind of spatters down on you, but I figured I would point this out. That slimy mess right there is how you know one of the tanks is empty, and that's when you stop. I'll go get some water, give that foam a chance to set up, and then whatever is goopy when I come back, we'll just wipe off, and then we can continue. But yeah, time for a little break. When I assembled the 3rd kit, I noticed that the gun only output the yellow component when at full throttle. As you can see here in the amount of foam in the box, I had thoroughly primed the gun. I arrived at the conclusion that this gun must be broken. Luckily, I could just switch to one of the guns I'd used earlier in the day. This was a little messy and somewhat tedious process, but at least I had that option. This would have been very annoying if I had just ordered 1 kit. The ceiling, just as last week, remains the trickiest bit of spraying, in part because it's upside down, but also because I have a bunch of little nooks and tight areas I want to make sure are thoroughly filled. I am delighted to finally be done spray foaming. I kept an eye on the timer on the camera, and it was pretty much exactly 45 minutes to empty each of the kits, and that's with the trigger pulled not all the way, but almost all the way. I don't know if this is just a personal preference thing, but I seem to have an easier time getting a slightly more consistent thickness with horizontal movements instead of vertical movements. As soon as I had finished spray foaming, I swear I thought it felt cooler in here. In my head I was like, oh, maybe that's like less radiating heat from the metal, from the sun hitting the metal on the outside of the shipping container, but I don't really know if that's true. It was pretty cloudy today, so it might just be a placebo thing. I have a little bit of juice left over in this kit, which is great because Captain Dum-Dum forgot to run an Ethernet cable to the outside of the shipping container. And also we need to install the mini split at some point in the next few weeks, and I'm hoping it won't be too cold by then. After I'd emptied my first kit a couple of weeks back, I thought, wait a minute, how the heck do I get rid of this stuff in a somewhat safe manner? Well, it turns out it's pretty simple. You just flip them upside down, vent whatever is inside out, let them sit for a day or 2, and then you can discard them as regular waste. On that note, not only does DIY spray foaming generate a fair amount of waste, it also does seem like it might be more expensive, as mentioned previously, and it's definitely more labor intensive than getting somebody else to do it for you. So yeah, if you're in an area where you can get a quote from a professional to come out and do it, it's definitely worth it to get a quote. Enough yammering on, we are finally ready for OSB, so let's get to that. Now that is going to be quite the workout, so prepare for another appearance of the hillbilly/redneck tiara. After a light bit of cleanup and some scraping of the floors, we were off to the races. Last week I did 2 trips to Lowe's to pick up 40 sheets of OSB as well as insulation. Now there's a fun little side story about this particular OSB that we'll get back to. I can fit almost 3 full sheets lengthwise in the container, and as soon as no trimming is required, it is super quick to put up the OSB. As a result, I had the first wall finished in no time. Where things start to get a little bit time consuming is trimming. And around the window, for instance here on the second wall, was super easy just to do that with the sheet in place. And in fact, the whole second wall was a breeze. Alas, then it was time for the ceiling. I removed the masking tape and trimmed back the foam in a couple of places, and then I spent the rest of the day running up and down the ladder. What made the ceiling a little bit more time consuming was the hangers for the second set of unistrut, as well as the unistrut that's already through bolted in place. But remember, I can't access these nuts with the spray foam in place, so I might as well just settle in and enjoy this prison of my own making. On a positive note, the straight bits along the unistrut were super easy, in part because they're nice and straight and easy to cut, but also because they're small and I don't need the drywall lift for them. Yesterday was quite the party. These sheets of OSB, they're deceptively heavy, but at least now we are done with the OSB with the exception of the little strip around the ceiling and of course the interior walls. And in case you're wondering, yes, this sock that's hanging here is to keep me from bumping my head on that. It won't be an issue once the tool cut is in place, but right now it's very tempting to just shortcut through here, and this is at a perfect height for me not seeing it. But yeah, it's not going to be an issue once the tool cut is here. I'm going to hold off on covering up this little strip up here until I have figured out the exact position of the blocks for the CNC hoist, because I want to get a nice fair lead from the winch directly to the table, which is going to be somewhere right around here. And to do that, it's going to be super helpful for me to be able to just temporarily secure some mock-up blocks in place to the OSB before actually drilling any holes in the steel angle that's hiding behind the OSB. And I know exactly where that angle is thanks to this little nut and bit of threaded rod up here. I've ordered all the blocks I need. Hopefully they'll get here in a few weeks. Now, I mentioned earlier that there was a fun little side story about Captain Dum Dum and these sheets of OSB here. See how it says sized for spacing? We all learn things every single day, whether we want to or not. So I had purchased a couple of 4x8 sheets of OSB just to figure out if I wanted to use OSB for the container workshop. And I brought them here and looked at them, and I decided that, yeah, for the money, that's probably going to be our best bet. I had paid $24 per sheet for this OSB, so I was pretty excited when I found some OSB for $14 per sheet, and it was also 4x8 sheets. It was perfect. I was at the local Lowe's, so I could just go pick them up. So I go there and I pay for 40 sheets. I can only fit 30 in the blue truck, so I toss 30 in there. It's a lot of work. And then at the second to last sheet or whatever, I see that sized for spacing. So at that point in time, it's too late to do anything about it. But it turns out that even though a 4x8 sheet says 4x8, just like a 2x4 is not actually 2x4 inches, a 4x8 sheet of sheet goods doesn't necessarily have to be 4x8 feet, because the size for spacing means that it's actually undersized by something like 1/8 or something like that to allow for spacing, which is probably great if you're using it for what it's intended for. But if your studs are 2 foot center on center spaced apart, then that 1/8, it really kind of adds up over the duration of 40 feet. So that was a little bit annoying. For the walls here in the workshop, it ended up being fine because I've got the sheets going long ways, and also I've doubled up the studs, so I have a little bit more room to play with there. But up in the ceiling, I have them going the short way. And that actually meant that the sheet that's right here is half of a sheet, because otherwise I would run short of my joist. Also, the tolerances in terms of thickness on this stuff is pretty horrendous. From checking just a few sheets, I saw that it varied up to 1 millimeter. But yeah, 14 bucks a sheet. It's a workshop. It's fine. I know that was a bit of a detour, but short version is I've really enjoyed building the shipping container, and I think it's been a great learning experience and also a bit of a warm-up in case we ever need to build, say, a small house or something like that. So yeah, enough yammering on. On the to-do list for today is to finish the interior walls. I've been looking forward to this day for weeks. It's going to be super exciting to see what the two office areas are going to look like in real life. Originally, I was going to use the Rockwool product that's specifically designed for sound dampening in these walls, but I happen to have a little bit of the regular R15 version left over, so I might as well use that. I spaced the studs and the interior walls with 16 inches specifically because I had this little bit of insulation left over. That sure was a lot easier than having to do all the trimming I did for the exterior walls. For the last little bit of the last wall, I was pretty much out of OSB. I have one sheet left, but I'd like to save that for the little gap along the ceiling. Luckily, with the technical closet there, it means I can use smaller pieces without the joints being visible. And that is it. We are 99% done with the OSB work. This is by far the most I've ever worked with OSB, and in my eyes, the most redeeming quality about this stuff is its price. I am not a fan. But to sheathe the entire shipping container in a decent quality plywood would have cost a small fortune. And I don't think we could really use plywood as it's likely to crack once we move the shipping container. So yeah, OSB was probably our best bet. For years, whenever I've crawled into a cramped compartment aboard Athena or something like that, I've joked saying, "Step into my office." And now I have a freaking office, or well, I mean, it's a small windowless room, so it's more like a dungeon, but for doing video editing or CAD work, this is going to be absolutely perfect. There's going to be no distractions. I FaceTimed Ava earlier today and I showed her her little office, and she was also super pleased. I really hope for her sake that I can get my junk out of here, because I put all of this in here before framing the wall, so hopefully the door opening is wide enough. Next week is the Annapolis Boat Show, but I do have a few days until I need to leave for that, so we can hopefully make a little bit more progress. Like for instance, getting started on the electrical system, maybe painting my office so I can put up some lights so I don't get lost in the darkness in there. And also I know Harbor Freight is going to have a deal on the toolbox I want, so we should also go pick that up. The last bit of construction I need to do is to insulate the floor in the office area. But Home Depot keeps pushing the delivery date for the stupid XPS foam, so I don't know if we can get to that in the next few days, but we can always cross our fingers. Seeing as we now have basically a finished workshop, we at least have all the materials we'll need to finish it. I think next week we'll also touch on cost, because this has not been a cheap process, and if you want a cheap workshop, I don't think a shipping container is the best way to go, but we'll get back to that next week. And on that cliffhanger of epic proportions, I'll end this week's video here. I hope to see all you guys back inside of the box next week for yet more Oh Glorious DIY. As always, feel free to leave a comment down below, and don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video, please remember to leave a like. See you! And of course, thank you so much to Surfshark for sponsoring this week's video.